Daisuke did all the translation. Nobody would grammar check him or English check him.
That sounds dangerous, but okay.
It was late 1989. Nobody else was doing fansubbing in this scale. A person would work on a fansub for a movie or a 30-minute OVA, but they'd spend, literally a year trying to actually put this thing together. So this is the first time.
A year for just a single production.
A lot of the software that people are familiar with doing fansubs with, they weren't invented yet.
They weren't a thing yet.
No one's really done this kind of thing.
How did conventions become a thing?
This was important for the growth of anime. Anime at this time wasn't big enough for us to have our own convention. We couldn't get the numbers needed to run our own convention. But
what do you think of modern conventions and modern fan communities?
We've now changed to a model for anime conventions where there's virtually no industry support. It's all IP theft.
I want to pivot off to something else here. How did anime and anime fans as a whole get a bad rep? So you were one of the original fansubbers back in the day. What's your story in all of this? How did you first discover anime and how did you end up really fansubbing it later on?
I sort of got exposed by this because in Canada, French is our second language, right? So, and we have a TV station which does French programming. And I remember when I was a little kid that sometimes I'd flip on there and I'd see this animation, okay? And I didn't know it was Japanese animation at the time, but they were playing things like Sing du Katsai, which is Katsai, and Albatura, which is Captain Harlock. And I remember watching that on the French channel. Again, being a young kid, not taking French at that time, I had really not a clue what was going on, but I was fascinated. The things I was seeing on the French channel were a lot more violent than things that I would see on like Saturday morning cartoons. For example, Spidey's Amazing Friends or Superman or Batman. All those things were very tame compared to what was happening on, let's say, Katsai or Harlock, right? But I didn't know that it was Japanese in origin from at that particular time. But I mean, I still was willing to sit there and watch this stuff in French, which I didn't have a really good grasp of even at the time. Later on into the 80s, I found more out about that and realized, wow, there's this whole other series, whole other genre that came from. Now, I know people on the other side of the ocean, and in, let's say, France, for example, they've had better exposure to anime than we did over here. Like, again, they've had, a lot of other titles that we've never got over here or have got it a lot earlier than we had over here. Started getting into this hobby of anime by basically, when I came down to Vancouver, going around the town, Chinatown and whatnot, and realized that there is all these things that, these new animated looking things that I've never seen before. These are the things like Dragon Ball and City Hunter and these kind of things. They look animated, but I've never seen them on like regular TV. So I started inquiring and trying to find more of this stuff. And as I keep looking, I'm finding more and more things. I met some people at the university who come from Hong Kong or Japan, and they were able to tell me that, this is called Japanese animation. This is animation from Japan. One of them is my translator, Daisuke, who I met at UBC. And he was an avid anime fan, and he really helped me get into and told me about all these different current animations and that kind of stuff that were coming out. Because again, he spoke Japanese. He was able to direct me into magazines and show me to some Japanese video stores, which actually rented videotapes of Japanese TV. I also had a few friends who were people who came from Hong Kong. In Vancouver, we kind of called them the fobs, fresh off the boats. I guess this is one of the kind of earlier renditions of the word. They also knew that, what this kind of animation was. And most of their stuff was, a lot of the, the Macrosses, the Southern Cross Mosquito, Doraemon, Dr. Slump, those type of things, they brought over when they moved from Hong Kong to Vancouver. And they introduced me to a lot of the stuff that they had. At this particular time, a lot of it was either, only translated in Cantonese, or, again, with the stuff from Japan was only straight in Japanese. And again, this helped me, build my collection. I'm starting to learn that there's this wealth of Japanese animation and that stuff from Japan and different places to get it. Now, the only problem was how to get over this language barrier. So one of the things that sort of happened at that time is that I was also a big fan of Chinese martial arts movies. So all your, the Bruce Lees, the Jackie Chans, the Sammo Hungs.
The good stuff. The good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so at this time, right, when I need to watch those type of things in English, okay, because I could understand some of the the Cantonese when it comes out, but sometimes when I look at the subtitles at the bottom of the screen, they're really, really poor, right? They're not the standard clear sort of computer generated subtitles. It looks like it was kind of like a film camera sort of superimposed, and then they'd be changing like hold up signs or cards, right? And they'd change the cards accordingly, right? So it was really, really primitive subtitling. And then the subtitles would be really, really poor, right? It'd be like things like, you kill my brother, I kill you, or things like that, right? It's just really, really corny, really
Oh, God. You remind me of those days. Oh, goodness me.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I saw that, and I'm going, this is how they're doing it for like a lot of these Chinese movies and that kind of stuff. In order to get anime more, in our view over here, we need to get it in English, right? We need to find a way to help people get interested in anime, but we needed to get it in English. And I'm thinking, if they can do that kind of primitive subtitling for Hong Kong movies, why not do it for anime? So I started looking into what it would take to put these subtitles and that kind of stuff onto a screen. And we're talking about the era of, at the first time when I did this, we're looking at the era of like the Amiga 1000 computer. We're talking, the era of early, what they call the TBC, which is the time-based correctors and that kind of stuff that sort of came out. These are consumer products that were available at the time. Sure, they costed about $1,000 Canadian at that time. Just as a reference, I was working part-time at an electronics store, Radio Shack. They only paid maybe $500 every 2 weeks, sort of thing. $500, $600 every 2 weeks. So this is like 2 months of paycheck just to buy the electronics, the Genlock card that was needed to do the subtitling. But I had my expenses at home paid, so my part-time job was all just spending money. So yeah, so I got this idea, like, hey, let's get this equipment together. I had Daisuke and I had Hong Kong friends that could do the Chinese translations and and whatnot. We basically got some translations of some of the early animes. We got that together. We got some primitive equipment together, and we found that, hey, this process, primitive as it was, worked. And from that, we just exploded forward. And we in the course of a year, we managed to finish actually, of course, a few months, actually, we ended up finishing all of Orange Road. And then we started, other shows like Maison Ikkoku, then Patlabor, and onwards. And then that's what sort of built this notion that, hey, there's this club in Vancouver that's actually translating and fansubbing this anime, and then all of a sudden, people wanted to get the videos from us. We gladly sent them out to all the different clubs and that kind of stuff, and that really got the notion that, hey, this anime thing is really actually pretty popular, and that's how the movement began.
I'm trying to figure out what question to go to, man. It's like there's so many. You don't choose your adventure books. I feel like you've given me so many options here. I'm like, I don't even know where to go. But I'm going to go to one I've just written down just to remind me of, right? So, when I was looking into you in Arctic animation, the one work that keeps coming up over and over again is Orange Road. What was so significant about Orange Road and your fansubbing of it? Because it seems to be the thing that everyone, well, dare I say, almost lost their mind over. I've seen some of your fan letters, and one of them was an anime fan club that basically said, like, you gave them the one thing they wanted, which was Orange Road. Like, Orange Road was so in high demand. What was the deal with it?
The story behind Orange Road was kind of strange. There was a lot of other animes which were probably a lot more popular. Even Maison Ikkoku was actually probably more popular in the TV ratings than Orange Road. But what had happened is that when I was going around looking for anime, and I was going around the different Japanese video stores and Japanese places that I knew that had anime, it came from this, literally, it wasn't even a video rental store. It was a Japanese grocery store. So it's just a family-owned mom and pop Japanese grocery store that sold some things and candies and that kind of stuff that were from Japan. I guess what they do is they get their relatives in Japan to send, say, hey, can you send us a care box of, a whole bunch of these, gums and candies and gummies and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, can you just press record on your VCR and just record 6 hours of whatever's on TV on this particular channel for 6 hours every day and just send us the tapes. And so I'd go to this grocery store, and right on top of all the meat coolers and the fish freezers and all that kind of stuff, are these rows of video cassettes. And some of them are like, just the labels are just packed with titles, and some of them just have a date on them, right? But
just a date, a mystery date.
Yeah, just a date. Just like this is on this particular date in 1989. Here's 6 hours of whatever's on NHK or something, right? For example, right? But it was like it was pretty cheap. It was like $2-3 or whatever, and you can rent it for like a week, and you just watch whatever's on Japanese TV, right? And it was at this time relatively current. I mean, you'd have a couple of months of backlog because of the fact that obviously they're recording, let's say, a tape a day. They wait until they get like 30 tapes, they put it into a box, and they send it to Vancouver, right? So sometimes you'd be like 1 to 2, 3 months behind what they actually showed in Japan. But I ran across this tape, and it was just a random mix of anime. It had some Dragon Ball on it. It had some Zeta Gundam, Double Zeta Gundam. But it also had this one really strange show called Orange Road. And it was a really strange episode because I think I sort of remember the first episode I watched, and it was kind of further in the series because, again, they don't label everything by episode title. So you just grab a tape, and again, might have just a date. So I get this episode. It's obviously not episode 1. And it was actually a really strange episode, but it messed up my mind in such a way that I'm watching a show and it looks like a high school comedy, right? I don't have any translation here, right? And all of a sudden, these strange events started happening. It was a time loop episode, right? So if you can imagine the Star Trek episode where they kept falling back into the time vorb, and they're playing the same episode over and over again. So they're doing this in Orange Road, and again, if you're watching this episode without translation, my mind's getting kind of like, what the hell's going on? But I was really fascinated by it because here I am. I'm used to either superhero shows. I'm usually interested in like mystery shows like Scooby-Doo or something. A lot of the Filmation sci-fi shows like Space 1999 or Jason Star Command or any of those type of things. So I'm used to those type of shows. But then all of a sudden here is literally like a slice of life high school type show, high school romance type show. And I was sort of a fan of this kind of stuff, and I've never seen it in an animated form. Right? Sure. I mean, at this time, I'd be seeing like Degrassi Jr. or, Northwood or something like that. But this is the first time I've seen like a high school sort of thing. And that's what really drew me into that. I was thinking, this is the first time, the animated teenage drama show. And I was like, okay, that seems really interesting. So then basically after that, I found out what the name of it was called Kimagure Orange Road. After that, I quickly went on and got the manga, went and got all the rest of the episodes. And the more I got with it, the more I got confused what was going on. Okay,
that's not usually supposed to happen, but
well, yeah, that's the thing, because you can usually figure out like most superhero shows. Here's the bad guy, right? Spider-Man will go against him, he'll get his butt kicked, and then he figures out something, and then by the end of the episode, they capture him, and then they deal with it, right? That's usually what usually happens on most typical superhero shows. That's what will happen in a Scooby-Doo, right? But there is something obviously is progressing. I'm not catching what it is. I'll come across episodes where, why did this happen? Right? I see one episode where I think, okay, well, this guy seems to be getting closer to the girl, but then another episode, she's like, doesn't know who he is and all this other stuff. So obviously, I'm missing a lot to the show, right? I think the final straw was I finally saw the last episode on the video, found the videotape that had the last episode, and I didn't get it. So then obviously I went to the manga. At this time, I was taking Japanese. I had a little bit of a grasp of Japanese. So I sat there and literally, photocopied the manga out, and I sat there and translated it all and tried to write it out in pen. And when I finished doing all that, I still didn't get what was going on. So I said, okay, the only way to fix this is I got to get someone who really knows their Japanese, and we're going to go through and actually do all the episodes, and then we can finally get it all clear, right? So at this time, I did know Daisuke, who I met at UBC again, but he doesn't like Orange Road, okay? He
didn't like Orange Road. That's a bit of a problem right there, I think.
Yeah, he was more of a, I said, at this time, he was more interested in a lot of stuff from Kenichi Sonoda, so he was interested in the Gal Force. And he was probably one of the more people that was more interested in Maison Ikkoku as opposed to Orange Road. So basically, after showing him this process of getting anime and that kind of stuff, and actually applying subtitles and actually doing a whole bunch of subtitles for, I think we actually did Vampire Princess Mew, Gal Force. I think we even did something like, like some of the really early, I think it was even one episode or 2 episodes of like Bubblegum Crisis, before we actually, really knuckled down and actually started really working on the Orange Road. And then I just sort of convinced them, saying, okay, if I got you a bunch of this stuff, would you help me with the translation of this? And I think he finally kind of gave in and kind of started doing that. So in terms of translation, yeah, I owe it all to Daisuke for that. And that really was a pivoting change. It was late 1989 was when we finally finished the first run of Orange Road. And at this time, nobody else was doing fansubbing in this scale, right? Maybe a person would work on a fansub for a movie or a 30-minute OVA, but they'd spend, literally a year trying to actually put this thing together. So this is the first time.
A year for just a single production?
Yeah, just a single production. Because the reason why it takes a long time to do works at this time is because it's all done in real time. It's also done linearly, so from basically start to finish. If you made a mistake or you needed to put a break or a pause in there was no way to stop it and try to re-cue it and re-add back onto it afterwards, because we're all doing this in real time. That's why if everything didn't sync up properly, if you made a spelling mistake or the computer froze or something, you would actually have to basically start from zero again and then basically retype something out. Fortunately, most TV episodes like Orange Road were only 22 minutes long each. Because literally, if you're timing it, starting, you would basically have to go play on the laser disc or the VCR. Sometimes at this time we didn't even have the laser discs for Orange Road at this time. we still were doing it off tape, so we'd press play on the VCR, we'd press record on the recording VCR. We'd have to wait until the exact moment the dialogue began, and then we'd have to press spacebar on the computer to get the timer to start at 0. And then we just basically let it roll, as it were, right? And we have to let it roll for 22 minutes, hoping that no mistakes will happen, the timer doesn't drift off, the computer doesn't crash, or some other weird thing happens, like the power goes out or something, or because in that 22-minute time is where you do your take, and if it fails anywhere in that, you have to start all over again. And there's multiple times where we've had to restart and redo it like 10 times in order to do it. And sometimes there were times where it was almost done, like 20 minutes into the thing, 2 more minutes to go, but the Amiga froze and one title would be just stuck on the screen for the last 2 minutes of the video. And,
my God.
So no, it's like,
no way.
Gotta rewind everything, do it all over again. I remember some nights, because like usually what happens is, I get home from school or from working at Radio Shack, and we'd start setting it up. We'd be going all the way into like midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, maybe even 3 o'clock in the morning, because we'd be trying to get it working. And then I'd have to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning to go to work. Some nights I would just get 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours of sleep sometimes, and go to work the next day, right? So yeah, it was sometimes really tough, and sometimes I know on a lot of the first run of episodes of Orange Road, it was like, okay, it was a little bit off there. Okay, well, let it go.
I've had enough. I want to go to bed. God damn it.
Yeah, that's it. I know that because as I said, our measuring tape at the time was those horrible Hong Kong movies, right? I remember things like some of the subtitles that came out. I remember watching a Chinese subtitle of Fist of the North Star, Hakuru no Ken. His famous line, "Omae wa shinderu," right? You're already dead. He'd be explaining how the blood, the blood be rushing to your head, and your brain will fill with blood and it'll explode or whatever, right? But the only title on the screen is "You're already dead." Right, and it'd stay there for like the entire the description of how this is, how we how the fists and whatnot would actually kill the guy, but no, it all says "You're already dead."
So like a super long explanation that lasts for a minute. It's just the same subtitle,
and the only words on the screen is this, right? So I'm thinking, okay, they got away with that in those Chinese movies. We'll let it go. The thing that I need to mention here is that because we're the first guys to actually do it, a lot of the software that people are familiar with doing fansubs with, like JacoSub or Alpha Substation or the Turbotitle or that kind of thing, they weren't invented yet.
They weren't a thing yet.
Yeah, because you got to think about it. Right? Like, this is before the internet, the quote, the internet as we know it, 1989, right? We're coming up with this process of putting subtitles using this, this Genlock equipment for putting subtitles on animes, right? No one's really done this kind of thing. So literally, someone had to go and build the software that we were using to do this, right? So I got introduced to some key people who knew in this case, it was just C. So it's not even C# or C+. It's just C. And they were able to program even something more basic than I said, the alpha substations, that kind of stuff. Very simple program to basically cue subtitles and put it on the screen and do this. So not only were we using the software and trying to do subtitles with it, we were literally beta testing it and basically making revisions to it as we were going along. So that's why if you ever see some of the really, really early Orange Road episodes that was done on the Amiga computer, there was a lot of things like clock drift and titles that would start off on time, and then they'd either start drifting too fast or too slow, and titles would not stay online all as much. There was a lot of that going on some of the early episodes when they did them, and that's because the software that we had didn't follow the clock properly. Back in those days, you couldn't accurately get information with the clock because obviously as the workload built up, the clock slowed down, right? So we had lots of issues like that. So again, that was another thing that we had to do in the early stages was we had to actually beta test all this stuff as we were subtitling it.
It's like the struggle of today's world when it comes to technology is trying to get it to work. And clearly the struggle in the old days is also trying to get it to work, but in a completely different way. Whereas here it's trying to figure out how to actually do it. Yeah, back in the old days, it's can you even do it at all? That's crazy, man. It's like beta testing it whilst you're at it and things not working properly. Like you can't even get the clocks to sync. And I just sound more terrified the more you tell me of this. It sounds like the most difficult work ever that you did back then. What motivated you to do this? Why were you and any other fan subbing group out there insistent on trying to make this happen? I get it, maybe it's to share the passion of other people and for some kind of maybe community building, supporting aspect of things. But like, why would you put yourself through this? It just sounds like hell,
I mean, the initial thought for me is that it was always out to basically get what I loved and what I liked to show other people that this is actually really cool and really good. This is different. Have a look at it yourself and see if you see it and enjoy it the same way I did. And definitely that's true for many, many, many of the shows that I did. Like especially ones that I was personally interested in that probably a lot of other people weren't interested in. So let's kind of go over some of the animes that I did and the motivations why I did them, right? So obviously Orange Road was 100% motivated by me because I just wanted to understand the story. Maison Ikkoku came around because that was Daisuke's favorite. Daisuke has the same thing. He was really enthusiastic of sharing anime, being a Japanese person, just finding it really interesting that North Americans here were interested in Japanese stuff. And he understood that the only thing that was preventing us from enjoying anime the way it was, it just needed to be translated. So he got really good at doing translations and doing translations off of audio cassettes. He had a really unique system for doing it. It was really quite cool. But yeah, Maison Ikkoku was his doing. Patlabor was his thing because he loved Commander Goto. Then we got into all the magical girl shows, and again, that's also the Daisuke's choice. We did Himi-chan's Ribbon, and that was one of those ones where again I was into all the Gundams and that kind of stuff, and I had no concept really of what a magical girl show particularly was. But I got introduced to Himi-chan's Ribbon. I really loved the first 18 episodes. Just got me hooked into that story. That was a really, really nice story arc. And again, this is one of those type of things where I never would have experienced that or saw that if someone didn't lay it out for me and showed me that, hey, you should check this out and you should do this. That was sort of my motivation for doing the rest of it, and getting that and then doing the rest of the Himi-chan's Ribbon and finishing that off with Daisuke. So he did that one. Of course, we did into Sailor Moon. That one was immensely popular. We did Nurse Angel Ridika. My other translator, John, we call him GTO.
Oh, nice. Okay.
His last name is Otsuka, so we call him Great Teacher Otsuka. So we did all of Nurse Angel. I like that one because it had more musical, because it had an AVEX soundtrack. That was really cool. And then Daisuke got really interested in Red Riding Hood Cha-Cha. And that's another of those magical girl shows. I didn't think anything. I thought it was a kid's show for the most part because it's literally the same theme every episode. But it had an extremely smart and witty and punny dialogue in that thing. It was really an unexpected find. What I mean is that, you can have animes which translate and say things in one sort of level, and it's understandable by kids on a particular level. But as an adult, if you look at it on a different level, or you listen to the innuendo on the second level, it's extremely entertaining and that kind of stuff, right? Because, for example, I'll give you a scene like Cerevi, the main magic user, the handsome magic user, has a little ventriloquist puppet, right? He's talking to, quote, his girlfriend or whatever, or his love interest or whatever. And he speaks to the puppet saying, "You look really, really nice today," right? And then under his breath, he'd go, "Yeah, with all that makeup on."
Oh, God, okay. This doesn't pull punches at all.
Yeah. So this is sort of all these jabs that go on throughout the show and little cynicisms and that kind of stuff. So one person will say something else, but someone else will add in something else that kind of puts it into a different perspective that the first person didn't. A very, very clever show if you want it. Azuku Cha-cha. Yeah, so we did the fan sub for that one. It had some popularity in North America, but I found it was really, really popular in Southeast Asia, where they actually have an English dub for it.
They had an English dub in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, on AXN, the anime network, they actually English dubbed Red Riding Hood Cha-cha.
Wow, okay.
Very well, very cleverly done for all the people who are in, Malaysia, Philippines, that kind of stuff. After that sort of point, then I got really into doing the animes that I was really interested in. So I remember watching in Japanese, and I got confused on a whole bunch of points. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get these things translated. I'm going to pay for translators. I don't care if they're translated from the Japanese or from Chinese, because at this time I started to get into a whole bunch of Hong Kong VCDs and that kind of stuff and whatnot. I was going to get some of the translations for some of the shows from that. So some of the episodes of Double Zeta Gundam, SPT Lasernar, Metal Armored Dragonar, Heavy Metal Elgaim, things like that. I did all from mixed Japanese and Chinese translations and that kind of stuff. I did those because I wanted to know what was going on in the show, and nobody else was doing it. No company was licensing this stuff, so I said, "Screw them! I'm going to do it myself." And then there we go, right? Looking back, it was obviously it was a lot of work for sure. Obviously, it cost a lot of money because I said the one of the hardest things for fan subbing groups at this time was the absolutely a prohibitive amount of money that it would require to get into this particular type of subtitling, right? I mean, sure, it was commercially available. I mean, you could go to a computer store to buy all the equipment, right? But again, the average person is going to have $2,000 probably. By the time you get the Laserdisc player and the higher end VCRs and that kind of stuff, you're probably going closer to $3,000, $4,000 Canadian to get this. And again, at around $500, $600 per month or per every 2 week, inlay. We're talking several months of income dedicated to just this purpose, right? Just to get the equipment. And so you can tell, like a regular average college student or whatever that has student loans and all of their stuff needs to pay for rent and buy their beer money every weekend. Obviously that's
needs to actually eat and stuff as well.
Yeah. So that was the big prohibitive thing. I mean, again, I think the large proliferation of fansubbers and that kind of stuff didn't start entering the field until probably even because I did an episode where I did the fansubbing list from 1994. So literally 5 years later, right? Most fansubbing groups at that time even did not even have more than maybe 10 tapes, 20 tapes worth of actual fansub material. Where at that time, we already did the entire series for Orange Road, the entire series of Maison Ikkoku, Patlabor. We already just started doing Sailor Moon. We were doing Himi-chan's Ribbon. We're getting into all the magical girl shows. So at that time, we were known as the group to go to get all the new stuff because we had a system where we figured out and managed to get and do this proficiently, able to spend the money needed to get the laser discs, to get the actual Japanese content. Because I think that's probably at this time one of the hardest things to do at this time is to find someone like a grocery store or anything like that had a connection to Japan to get the source video. Vancouver was just really good for that.
It's crazy for me to think about that. When digi-subbing was really taking off, you'd find like a fan sub group just chucking out an episode every week. But back in those days, it's It's mind-blowing to me to think how different the level of output is. And again, it's because of the technology. You couldn't just conveniently make stuff happen. You had to sit there and time it. And if you got it wrong, oh my God. And then obviously you have to make multiple copies of this stuff as well, which is even more time consuming. You got to make sure it actually gets to the end, the player doesn't crash, the computer doesn't crash. This is a true test of patience, good sir.
The other thing I also maybe make a note is that, again, 1998, right? So this is way before Windows 95. There was no way to do the networking or any sort of to spread the workload out, right? Everyone had to be kind of within the local area, within basically like physical presence. You couldn't like farm out the timing to one person. You couldn't farm out whatever all the other things that they need to do, typesetting, corrections to the to the time file, grammar corrections, and that kind of stuff. You couldn't like send that to one person, send that to another person, send that. No, all that had to be done locally. And one person couldn't continue until the other person's finished, because obviously we're only working with one file, right? So you can't kind of group share the work. So you got to think, in this process, literally all this had to be done in-house pretty much by a small group of people. All the jobs had to be done by this group of people. So generally speaking, it broke down to basically Daisuke did all the translation. Nobody would grammar check him or English check him. We just assumed that whatever he translated is the way it went.
That sounds dangerous, but okay.
Yeah, well, that's sort of how it ended up, and I'll tell you an interesting story about that. I'd be the one that sort of timed it out. My Japanese is not perfect. All I did is I just followed by he said, like he said this, she said that, he said that, she said that. I'm following by who is saying stuff rather than what's actually being said, right? Where obviously if a person who spoke Japanese would know exactly when a person would say something and that kind of stuff. Ideally speaking, a Japanese person would have been a better person to time it. Then you would have a person who edited it. And at the beginning, I was usually the person that had to edit the file. And usually I only just corrected things usually things like subtitles that stuck. I might have left the subtitle on too long, or I made a mistake, or times where I might have fell asleep for like 5 minutes and then I have to fix that block of titles or stuff like that. But so I'd be the quick editor, and then I'll be the one that actually has to retime everything and sync it. Later on, when we got to some of the other titles, when I opened up my store and whatnot, other people wanted to help out, wanted to do their own subtitles, wanted to do their own sort of things and help out. So now all of a sudden I have more translators, more editors, more time correctors, so some more people that actually sat in and corrected the file to fine precision. Then we were able to get some really nice stuff coming out later on. But there are situations like that happened. And so the story I wanted to tell you, I remember it was Bubblegum Crisis 1. Daisuke did his translation, and then he got to that point where right near the beginning, where Chris was bragging about her new Motor Slave bike, right? And then the translation obviously would have went something like, "Oh yeah, it's so many thousand cc, it has this many revs, and then it has the engine is this much horsepower, blah blah blah." Anyway, Daisuke didn't want to translate that, right? So all he wrote was bike shit. Okay.
Yes, so indeed. Okay, Daisuke.
Okay, no problem. I'll put up the timing file, and all of a sudden, and it comes to the title on the screen. It says bike shit. Okay, I'll just leave that on the screen while she blabs on about blah 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 blah, and then I'm thinking okay, maybe I'll fix that later or whatever, right? So then so I do finish the timing file, then I'm going through and I'm fixing it, going, oh right, yeah, he said that bike shit stuff. Well, I don't know what this like I said, he's my my key translator. Am I going to pester him to say, can you just do a little bit of a better job doing that? And so I said, nah, I'll just leave it. So on that copy of Bubblegum Crisis 1, the first time we did it, we left it the way it was. So when Chris does her spiel about the bike, all that sits there for literally a whole minute is bike shit.
That's going to be like that's going to be like a meme video somewhere floating around, like an out of context clip.
Yeah.
Someone has to find a copy of it and make that a thing. That's going to be amazing. You've clearly had some very fun times doing some crazy things, but probably some really stressful times as well. What was a typical working day like for you? Both, say, when you first started out and then when you sort of got to the point where everything was just at its maximum peak. What was an average day for you like?
Early when I started, when I was doing Orange Road, It was basically, I would wake up in the morning around 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. Either I'd have a class or I'd go to work a standard day. I'd get back around 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, around there. Quickly, make something to eat, go and check out some different things that are online or whatnot, like BBSs and that kind of stuff, because that was our means of communication at that particular time. And then basically, then I would boot up the computer and start looking at translations and that kind of stuff, and then basically work until I try to finish up by around midnight, and then then try to go sleep. But sometimes, as I said, when a particular file or a particular thing is not working, sometimes I'd be up until like 3 a.m. in the morning doing stuff. So it was like that for pretty much the entire time I did Orange Road and Maison Ikkoku. So that's probably like this, 1989 to about end of 90s, right? 90s, almost 91. We had, already done Orange Road. We virtually almost finished doing all of Maison Ikkoku. So, we're all like 48 episodes. We're almost 96 episodes for Maison Ikkoku, which is already an unheard of number already. At this time, one of the things I thought about is that, in order for me to let people have better access to this anime, is I decided to start initially it was just an office, but it ended up turning into a full-fledged video store. And this is where I basically made available all the different fan subs that we're doing, made available specifically Japanese anime, even if it's still in Japanese, make available those animes and that kind of stuff, and basically allow people to come in and get that. And so my schedule changed a little bit. A few days here at Radio Shack still a limited time at the anime store. So I usually opened around noon or so and went to around 6 o'clock roughly. And then after that, I'd go back home and then continue working on fan subs and that kind of stuff. Now the difference is that now when I open up the anime store, people wanted to help out and get into also doing some anime. So I started now lifting some of the editing duties, the grammar checking, and that kind of stuff to some of the people that would come by the store all the time and want to help out, want to get more into it. So that's why things starting from, let's say, Patlabor and onwards really started to become
to pick up.
Yeah, the big pickup in both quality, timing, and whatnot. It was really the big push for that.
You had a store, like an anime video store called Anime Jyanai.
Okay.
Which, by the way, absolutely great name. By the way, I understand the reference. It's like, oh god, that's a proper name right there.
Yeah. I remember I used to use it as a test to see how much Japanese you actually knew.
Oh, it's good. It's a very good test. It's a very good test indeed. But I thought you ran Anime Jyanai like exclusively. Like, so you actually still worked at Radio Shack. Like, you worked 2 jobs and still. You said, even 3 jobs. You did Radio Shack, you did Anime Jyanai, and you also still did essentially the fan subbing as well. You did 3 different jobs.
I think at that time it was still pretty half split. So so usually what I do is I'd work a part of the day at Radio Shack because I'd open that because they usually open at 9 or so, and I'd do a couple hours or whatever there, or if they needed to fill in the entire day, and then and then afterwards I'd go back and run the store. Sometimes I'd have someone else open up the store for me or whatever, and run it for a few hours or whatever, and then I'd take over afterward. And then later on, as I got more experienced people, I got them to run the daily operations for the entire day. But the store was nice, especially in the later renditions of the store. It was really just go to work to basically watch anime all day or play video games all day. It was really a dream job, yes.
So what was or dare I say, what was the business model of Anime Jyanai? Like, what did you actually sell, and what was the draw point for people to come to that store if it wasn't, say, the things you were selling? From what I sort of gathered, it seems like it was more than just a store. It's like a community hub where you all hang out and you have a great time together. It's like a party every day, I guess, in some ways.
Well, yeah. So initially, what my idea is, actually, it was kind of funny because I didn't really actually draw up any business plans or that kind of stuff. In the end, actually, it wasn't actually the store that actually made any money for me. It was actually the property that the store was actually on. So we had all these fan subs, right, that we make or whatever, or these sort of amateur made translations of anime, right? To keep in line with the ethics of fan subs, I made these videos available at no charge. So all you had to do is get a membership to the store, and you weren't charged anything to rent any of these videos. So we had all the stuff that I mail ordered, all the stuff that we were working on, they had no charge. Now, what I was charging for was all the commercial release stuff. And at this time, we're talking about 92, 93, onwards from there. The really basic and early animes were just starting to trickle out from the major US companies, right? So we're talking about things like, the Bubblegum Crisis, the Dangayos, the Ixer ones, a lot of the stuff that came out from US renditions, the Anime Ego, Central Park Media, and that kind of stuff at the very, very early parts of that. And so I'd get the $5 rental fee from those animes and that kind of stuff. I'd also have posters, I'd have books, I had soundtracks. I think that was a really big seller at that time. And comics was also a part of the thing, because there were some US translated comics of things for anime. I think the first early ones were things like Area 88 and Mai the Psychic Girl and things like that. And again, we're talking about a time where this stuff was not really available anywhere else. Sure, you can go to a comic book store and get some anime comics, but you wouldn't be able to find the anime CDs or find anime video, video rentals and that kind of stuff. Obviously, places like or things like Blockbusters doesn't exist yet. So again, I'd cornered the video rental market in terms of something specifically anime, where a regular store, even when Blockbusters did come, I still had a way bigger selection of stuff and a more concentrated selection of anime than they did. That was where the income sort of came in. One of the things I did when I got to my third store is, instead of renting it from people, I decided to buy the property outright. And so I got one of these properties, which was sort of like the store at the bottom and the living space on the top. An old-fashioned style, sort of kind of made for those people who, like, you ran the grocery store at the bottom and you lived upstairs.
Yeah,
sort of, mom and pop shop type of idea. And so I bought this unit, and basically I used the bottom part for the anime store and I rented the top part to my friends.
I see. Okay.
So that basically paid for all the taxes and all that other stuff and whatnot. And basically it allowed me to freely spend the money that came out of the anime store. And in the end, it was actually the rise in the property value of the property when I sold it that actually ended up netting me probably more money than I would have ever made running the anime store.
Wow. Okay. Going to a slightly different topic then. You've kind of mentioned it a little bit here and there, or referenced it. What was networking like between different fan clubs like back in the day? It sounds like, especially from reading some of the fan letters that you've shared on, say, your website that is dedicated to Arctic Animation, your fansubbing group, you were all sort of interconnected through like snail mail, good old-fashioned post and letters. Like it's almost mind-boggling for me to think about that as, in today's world. But how did you guys all like network or even hear of each other in the first place? Some of these places are all the way in like some random states of the US. Like, how did they hear of, say, Arctic Animation, in this random place in somewhere in Vancouver? Like, how did you hear of this stuff? How did you even discover this stuff? How would you have done that?
Well, obviously, Google didn't happen until at least an actual formal version of Windows actually came out, right? So, back in '89, there is no Windows. Even, right?
Yeah. There's no Windows, definitely.
So to answer your question is that the big powerful thing at this particular time was the thing called a fanzine. Basically, all these sort of local clubs, local groups, started forming in different cities. Sometimes at different university would have a club, right? So basically, you end up with these, colleges, whatever, UCLA, Rutgers, and whatnot. They would have like a small little group of guys together that would be making this anime club. So one of the things that sort of happened at this sort of time was everyone was making these sort of fanzines, self-publicated sort of magazines or newsletters, okay? And then what they would do is they would send and basically take members in from not only around their university or college, but from overstate and whatnot, right? And this sort of network of fanzines and little clubs was created. One of these sort of networked fan groups was called the CFO, the Cartoon Fantasy Organization. It actually stemmed from the furry fandom. Fred Patton was one of the big initiators of this. So basically, you had a network of different cities and that kind of stuff all across North America, and even a couple out in Australia and whatnot, that had set up a network. So basically, when you produced a fanzine, that information or that fanzine could be sent to another one of the nodes or to another one of the fan groups. So, for example, if you're at UCLA, for example, and you just produce a 1 or 2 page little sort of thing saying, hey, our monthly meeting is on the 3rd Sunday, and we're going to be showing Project Echo, the movie or whatever, and you have some people draw some fan art and make it about 2 or 3 pages, and then you staple that together. Put a kind of a coupon that says if you're interested in joining the UCLA whatever, put your name here, $5 or whatever, and you can join our club, right? And then they'd take this newsletter and they would send it to every other CFO club that was in existence, and they'd have a list of all the other chapters, right? So they'd send one to like Denver, they'd send one to like Atlanta, they'd send one to New York, they'd send one out to Florida. I know California had a ton of them. They had one at Berkeley, they had one at UCLA, they had one down at Orange County, Anaheim, San Diego. So you send it to all those people, and then so they would not now know that you exist first of all. You have you're showing these type of movies or whatever. You might have some of them had tape trading lists. It's like, these are things that are available in our club's library. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, please contact the club treasurer or whatever it is or whatever. So one of the ways I got into this network is one of the CFO chapters was in Victoria. And that is just basically a ferry ride across from Vancouver. And, their members, both the treasurer and the chapter head, met in the early days at a comic book convention. And I know the other guy at the local sci-fi convention. We have a convention called VCon. And we met there. From that, I got the club's chapter. I joined them, and they sent me all the information about the rest of the chapters of the CFO. Like a child in a candy store, the first thing I did is I wrote basically a form letter, introduced myself, and saying, "Hey, I'm a new fan of anime. I'm interested in this thing called Japanese animation. Could you send me some more information about how to get anime or how to join your club or whatever?" I'll send the reply letter and that kind of stuff. And at this time, they have this thing called an SE, which is a self-addressed, self-stamped envelope. So that way, the person can then write their response, put it into the envelope. The envelope already has your address on it and a stamp on it. So that they can just, fill it in, put it out, and then drop it back in the mail. And then they would mail back all the information about their club. So one of the first clubs I joined outside of it was the CFO Denver, the club in Denver. And I got their information from their club. And one of the things that, when I did is I joined up, I think it was like $5, $10 or whatever to join their club. One of the first things that was really neat when you join their club is they send you the contact information of everyone else that's already in the club. I realized that probably is a privacy violation, thing, right? In modern day. But considering, right, I guess they think, why would a person in Vancouver be any threat to a person in like Denver, right?
So, such innocent times we had back then. Such innocent times.
Yeah. So exactly. So so literally, yes. So I would have all this contact information for every single person that was in Denver. And so the same thing would happen. I'd go, okay, now I know all these things. I'd again do the same thing. I'd mail an introduction to every single one of those people. And one of my first contacts was this person named, I'll change her name to Cindy. She was extremely helpful, college student going to the University of Colorado. Big fan of Zeta Gundam. She did the same thing I did. Drew a huge picture of Camille, life size, and has that on her wall, because I drew a life-size picture of Minnie.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And that, we exchanged lots of letters, and then we started trading tapes, and not only just the video tapes, but we also traded a lot of audio tapes, because she was a big music fan, right? So she got me really interested in Japanese soundtracks and that kind of stuff and whatnot. So again, and this proliferates, and then again, I kept getting my name out there at this time just as a collector, right? Just trying to find out more about anime, trying to get more into anime. And then soon what will happen is that when I started putting out, Orange Road, the word quickly got out that, hey, there's this group in Vancouver that's got this stuff. It wasn't too long before, all the different clubs going and saying, hey, we'd be interested in showing Orange Road or Bubblegum Crisis or Vampire Princess Mew or this kind of stuff at our club meetings, because that helps people get into the clubs. They get over that big hurdle of translation and playing the same stuff that everyone else is playing. Yeah, it was great. A lot of new content, and that's how we spread this thing called anime all over.
How important was the Cartoon Fancy organization in the early days? That name keeps coming up over and over again when it comes to any kind of research anyone does into the history of fansubbing. It keeps coming up. And it's really strange for me to think about because it's like, it's given me the most base take in the world, which is that basically the entirety of the Western anime fandom, or at least in North America, it owes its entire existence to the furry fandom. It's like I could never have imagined that to be a thing, you know. So how significant were they? Would we even have the same version of history without them?
I would say they did a heck of a lot of the network and the legwork necessary to have the architecture set up. Because obviously you got to think, there had to have been some way that, you know, or some sort of method that these people got in contact with each other and basically built this sort of network. Maybe in a later time, you know, with things like FidoNet and whatnot, and actual dial-up BBSs, such a network might have been able to be created, but it'd be an extremely, shall we say, nerdy network. If it wasn't already that way already, right? This was sort of a little bit more palatable to the everyday average person. I definitely think that the CFO, when it was set out and laid out the way it was, really made things quicker and basically expand way faster. Because otherwise, it might have expanded using, you know, as I said, FidoNet. But the problem is that only the people who were like computer BBS nerds and that kind of stuff would be able to make advantage of that. And then from that, they would have to basically build their clubs around that and try to get people that weren't so computer connected to be interested in anime. It's already bad enough that only the so to say early internet adopters, which was again the people who were at universities and government installations, only they were sort of the computer nerds, shall we say, at this time, and they were a little bit more, you know, shall we say, connected to the outside. So they were able to, you know, make a club in a university, right? Because, for example, internet at this time, the only people who had it would be, again, universities, which, you know, if you had a .edu suffix to your address, you could have, you know, some sort of thing, right? Like that, right? You know, so if you're at UCLA, you could make a UCLA.edu and then make a UCLA club. And then, of course, yeah, then you get the people who went to that university to join your little club. Whereas if you were, let's say, you know, on a FidoNet node in the middle of Seattle, for example, only the people in the BBS community, the FidoNet community in Seattle would be interested. And those would be more computer guys, maybe more interested in talking about computers and that kind of stuff, rather than talking about anime or you know, science fiction and whatnot. The only other thing that would have helped grow the anime in North America without the CFO would have been commercially released fanzines like Animag or VMAX or Protoculture Addicts, for example. Those sort of fan magazines had you know, articles about animation and that kind of stuff, but usually in they have a, I guess it'd be like a classifieds, I guess, and they would list fan groups and you know, anime conventions and that kind of stuff that would have happened and whatnot. But again, that was later in time, and if it wasn't for the CFO to get, you know, certain people online, that might have been probably much later. So probably even into the mid 90s before that sort of same influence might have happened. So definitely, yeah, the CFO really helped, if not anything, laying down the network for everything to flow smoothly. That's for sure.
You've essentially witnessed history in the making, so you would have seen some of these things essentially develop or begin when they were first around. How did conventions become a thing?
In the early 80s, okay, there wasn't really, quote, a convention, right? The closest thing that we had, I'm sure most of us are used to, is a comic book convention. So basically, at this time, would be a bunch of comic book stores. They get together at a local community hall or something, or maybe even a hotel ballroom or something, and they'd put on and sell, basically try to sell off all their back issues of comics that they couldn't sell in their store, right? And this was important for the growth of anime, since anime at this time wasn't big enough for us to have our own convention. You know, we couldn't get the numbers needed to run our own convention. Even in a small gymnasium, we probably wouldn't be able to have enough people to come in. But if we kind of was a guest at a comic book convention or a Star Trek convention or a Star Wars convention or something, or even a sci-fi convention like VCon. I remember in the early days before we did Anime Evolution, we'd always try to have a table or maybe a room or something that we could show anime or display flyers and that kind of stuff for our anime showings and that kind of stuff. And that was sort of our way into a convention, but not be at the convention itself. It wasn't until about 90, probably I'd say 89, 90, where at least in Vancouver here, and even probably in Seattle, which is probably the largest U.S. city, started having the calculations and the kind of needed sort of thing, saying, yeah, if we actually wanted to make our own convention just about anime, I think we probably have enough fans, like maybe 1,000 or so fans, that would probably show up to a hotel or whatever and have a full-fledged convention with a dealer's room, with panels, with maybe some contests. We could probably get some local support from the vendors and whatnot to come and basically be at this convention. That was sort of the thing that was sort of arising then. At this time, I was starting to go down to the San Diego Comic-Con. I would get a bunch of friends together and we'd do a road trip from Vancouver all the way down to San Diego to do shopping and to basically go to the Comic-Con, right? And there we saw the forming and the starting of this thing that later will be Anime Expo.
What do you think of conventions nowadays then? Because you've obviously seen conventions change over time. And obviously things don't stay the same forever. Things expand, new social trends become a thing, atmosphere and perhaps maybe community mindset changes over time as well. Like, what do you think of modern conventions and modern fan communities?
So in the past, conventions was the thing and the place that you go and get anime. When you go to that convention, the thing on your mind would be, okay, I'm going to go to this convention because all the big names are going to be there pushing all the new titles and all the stuff that's going to be available coming out that year. So you're going to have Pioneer there, you're going to have Bandai there, Viz, Amiego, all those guys. They're going to have sheets and stuff, and maybe some samplers and flyers and that kind of stuff all ready for you. So when you come in there, they're going to say, hey, check this out. This year we're releasing Bubblegum Crisis. They're going to give you flyers for like extra one or whatever, and whether that's coming on VHS or whatever. So you are going to go there to find out all the new cool stuff that's coming out in anime that year. The second thing you'd be going through is going to the dealer's room to buy and get the cool stuff, because a lot of the local comic book shops and all the retail outlets in your area had no anime. Comic book store may have one or two video cassettes. You'd go to like your electronics media stores or whatever, like your Chapters or Best Buys and even Walmart's for that example. Even though Walmart didn't exist yet, but there wasn't no anime section. There, you go to the video section, you see Star Wars, you see Star Trek, and you see a whole bunch of Rocky movies and whatever, right? You're not going to see no anime. So for a lot of people, it was, okay, I'm going to go to this convention, I'm going to find myself a copy of Bubblegum Crisis, and I'm going to buy it, right? At this time, the focus is a lot on spending money to get the merchandise, whether it's video cassettes, whether it's CDs, whether it's posters, and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that you also come in is you go to watch anime that you wouldn't have been able to see in your local club and that kind of stuff. So a lot of the early anime conventions and that kind of stuff had more viewing rooms. Okay, I remember the first couple of anime conventions that we did up here, we had up to 5 different rooms, dedicated to showing different tracks.
5 different viewing rooms.
Yeah. So one room would maybe be more centered towards movies and that kind of stuff. One would be more sort of episodic and kind of that kind of stuff. One room would be just like 24 hours of nothing but AMVs, just nothing but AMV after AMV after AMV. Another one would be it'd be like mixed discussion, kind of stuff. Because sometimes we'd end up with someone who wanted to be from a vendor or whatever would be there, and they'd show stuff, and so they would show videos and be able to to talk about it. But yeah, we'd have lots of rooms running different tracks of different anime, and they were all translated at this time, right? Maybe not all dubbed, but at least all translated, right? That was the focus of a lot of these anime conventions. Dealer's room, big focus. The content was all anime related, and to show and present more of the anime. And occasionally, yeah, be more the the big anime guest would be usually an artist or a director or that kind of stuff that would come, and a lot of people would be interested in getting autographs of stuff from them, right? Fast forward past the anime crash in 2008 and the proliferation of more anime digitally online. We've now changed to a model for anime conventions where there's virtually no industry support. There are no more Viz and Bandai, at least in the US here, Anime-Ego and all these companies. They're all shells of themselves, right? So they're not going to be out there telling you these are our new releases or anything. Hell, even if the last Crunchyroll booth that I saw was just a kiosk, a screen on a kiosk. They had nobody standing there. So all of a sudden, that information's now gone. What's coming up, what's new, that kind of stuff. Everything's now online. Everything's available at all your media outlets and that kind of stuff. You can go to Walmart, and there's a whole section of anime now. So you've now removed all the people who would normally sell the anime. You removed all those those vendors and that kind of stuff who would bring in their their store inventories and that kind of stuff to sell their anime, because now that's not necessary. That's not needed. As I said, all the viewing rooms are now all gone because everyone just watches everything online. So you don't need to go to the convention to find out what's new or to see anime that you haven't seen before. So that's all done redundant. So what has replaced all this? Well, now you go into dealers' rooms, and it's almost all basically homemade, homegrown, home-drawn stuff. For the most part, it's turned into in the old days, it was called the artist alley, right, where local artists and that kind of stuff can show off their stuff and whatnot. In the early days, it was a totally separate part. It was usually fairly small, and people could do whatever they sort of did on their section now. But now they can't fill the dealer's room full of anime people, anime industry, anime, that kind of stuff, or stores that want to sell anime merchandise, because a lot of that stuff is all done online, right? So now, especially a lot of the smaller conventions and that kind of stuff, is all filled with people selling, basically photoshopping posters of anime and selling that. People making crafts like knitting sweaters or making pillows or making hats, making cosplay. I've seen people making pins and making cutouts of this and that, stickers for cars and whatever. It's all, as I said, great and dandy that all these people are using, shall we say, artistic sort of outlook. But the key problem with all of this is that none of this stuff is paid for or authorized, right? It's all IP theft. The person who does Naruto is not making any money off of this person who has photoshopped the picture of Naruto, or this person who's made this, pin of Naruto. Or I've seen a lot of people make, let's say, sticker sets for Pokemon. Well, I'm sure the people at Pokemon not been notified or getting any licensing from these things that you printed out on your printer, right? I've been at the latest Anime Revo that we've had, and I'm pretty sure that 80% of the booths are not selling anything legitimate. That's now the new thing. The second big thing that has happened in conventions recently is obviously the rise of cosplay, but not only just the rise of cosplay, but the whole entire rise of, it's not about the anime that we're here for, it's about me. It's what I can do. Not only am I this cosplayer and whatnot, here's my entire list of channels and Instagrams and Twitter and whatever. I can do all this other stuff or whatever, whether it's making the cosplay, actually design or creation of props and that kind of stuff for cosplay, and this whole entire secondary industry of fan-made, fan sort of commissioned market. Okay, so if you want someone to draw something for you, if you want somebody to create a costume for you, if you want someone to build an armor, do you want someone to 3D print you a Sailor Moon staff or something? This is now the new thing that you can get at an anime convention dealer's room now, and it's kind of sad because, as I said, I mean, it's nice that, again, you can use it for your quote artistic outlook or whatever, but it prevents the con from getting any industry support in the future. Because here you have this problem, and I always like to go to this issue with my Kimi Takeda story as a prime example. It would be Anime America 1990. So this is the year before Anime Expo 91. Or sorry, Anime America 91. So a year before it actually changed its name to Anime Expo 92. The guest at the con, and this was in Anaheim, so the guest at the con was Kimi Takeda, the artist for Orange Road. And so, just like everyone else, you get in line, and there's a whole bunch of Orange Road merchandise and whatnot that you want to get signed by her. The problem is the Orange Road came out in '86, and so this is 1990. So anything current in terms of products like posters and that kind of stuff, and CDs and even lasers for that is kind of a couple years old now. So it's not that easy to come by, right? So getting some legit stuff might be a little bit on the harder side and a little bit more on the expensive side, but whatever. Okay. So here I am standing in line. I decided to bring the art book that comes in the Orange Road box set. It's basically a nice compiled art book of all of Kimi Takeda's artwork in a limited edition art book that came inside the Laserdisc. Right? So I'm standing in line, and there's a whole bunch of people in front of me, and they're getting their stuff signed. And what's so funny is that a person would bring up a poster, and I know that it's not a legitimate poster, and then you'll know too, and you'll know why when I explain it. These are posters which are Hong Kong knockoffs. They sell for about $5, and you know that in Chinese you don't write Kimagure Orange Road in Japanese on it, right? It's 4 Chinese characters written so that the sound is supposed to be Orange Road, right? So obviously, if you bring this up to a Japanese person who this is their artwork, and they go and read this 4-letter kanji that's written on the top, which doesn't say Orange Road, which doesn't translate to Orange Road, she kind of looks at it going, okay, this is my artwork, but that's not the title for Orange Road, right? Because it's written in Chinese, right? And then she kind of goes, okay, yeah, I'll just kind of sign this, you're kind of with this weird look on her face going, yeah, okay, this is sketchy, whatever, right? So there's probably a whole bunch of people that went to the con that year thinking, oh yeah, I got this autograph from Kimi Takeda on my Orange Road poster. No, not realizing that the poster they got it signed on is this Hong Kong bootleg poster. And of course, they'll probably find out when someone watches this and tells them, that poster on the wall, that's a fake poster because it has those 4 Chinese characters on it, right? Anyway, so by the time I got up to her, right, she was super surprised to see this work because she's never seen this book before. So she quickly flips through it and she realizes, yeah, this is all my artwork that I've done for all the Laserdisc covers, the CDs, and all that kind of stuff. And she looks through it. It's got the Japanese wording on it, and it's even got a Japanese fold on it, right? And she's so surprised to see something that's legitimate, right? Something that she's never seen, and it's legit, right? And I had to tell her, this is the limited edition book that comes inside the Orange Road Laserdisc box set. It's a limited edition thing, right? I even took out this, when you buy the box set, right? There is like a credit card, like Orange Road card in it. So it's like a plastic card. It has an Orange Road picture on it. And it actually, like a credit card, has a number etched into it, like a credit card number would be etched in. There's 10,000 copies of this box set made. And I had like copy number 374 or whatever. And I pulled that card out and told her, I said, yeah, so this is box number 374 of whatever of this box set. And this contains this limited edition book. And she was so surprised and so amazed that someone actually has this kind of collector type of item. She not only signed her name on it, but she started drawing sort of a line art picture of Madoka with the hair and the eyes and that kind of stuff, also on the thing as well. So that was my treasured item for the Orange Road series and how I got my thing signed from Kimi Takeda.
I hope that's locked away in a safe or something like that.
Yeah, I got it all nicely put up and framed and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Going back to modern conventions, I mean, I don't know if it's just maybe because I've not really been to many anime cons and I've not really thought about it much, but it's never dawned on me that fact that what you just mentioned. I mean, so just to sort of sum up what you basically said, originally conventions were places where you went to. They were essentially marketplaces for legit merchandise, essentially, right?
Yeah.
But nowadays, because of the nature of consumption, we're no longer consuming physical things. We're not buying physical things for the most part, I mean, obviously, you still get people who buy things like figurines and all that sort of stuff, gunpla, you still get some things bought. But essentially, when it came to perhaps what people were perhaps going there for when it comes to certain anime merch things, it's either something that we don't need to physically buy because it's like, say, video you can stream online, or it's physical merchandise you can buy online itself. What you're saying is nowadays, today's modern anime conventions, they don't actually have any, well, I'm sure there must be like a booth or two somewhere that has some legit merchandise. But essentially you're saying that there's not really much legit merchandise anymore. It's just all essentially artist alley. It's just that instead of, say, selling maybe their own brand of comics and their own unique, their own original sort of work, they're now selling essentially their own sort of, like you say, like Pokemon stickers and their own illustrations and drawings, their body pillow covers that they commissioned someone to draw, they drew themselves. It's all just full of that now.
Yes. And it's really kind of really bad because it said it wasn't this convention, but it was a couple of conventions ago. So you have this environment where it's really hard to find that kind of stuff that's legitimate. So I think it was 2 years ago. We got one of the guys from Dragon Ball. The problem is now, if you wanted to go and do the autograph session or whatever with him, trying to find any legit merchandise for him to sign, the same story that I'm telling you with the Kimitagara, might be really difficult. Because obviously you don't want to come up to him with some guy's photoshopped, CG rendered version of Goku and say, "Oh yeah, can you sign this?" Like, no.
I mean, you remind me of like stories of how certain voice actors, for example, they've basically said that they won't sign anything that's not legit merchandise. Especially, say, obviously bootleg DVDs and stuff as well. And the problem with some of this stuff is some people, because nowadays it's sometimes made quite convincingly, some of them don't realize that it is like bootleg like merchandise as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before the anime crash, I know that some of the stuff come out of Hong Kong and Taiwan, they were like really spot on. I've always joked that the Hong Kong was like the bootleg capital of the world, but I mean, yeah, they were doing a really good job on some of the anime stuff that was coming out there, and it's really tough to tell. But yeah, you don't want to ever be stuck in that situation where you're trying to present yourself well in front of a guest of honor or something like that, and then you come up with this crap, and unfortunately, a lot of these newer a lot of conventions, unless you're the top tier of conventions, it's really hard to get enough people and that kind of stuff into these conventions to make it worthwhile to sustain. And I've been to also a bunch of conventions where it gets to a point where a lot of people inside the anime room are not anime people. They're just there to market to the anime person. For example, was at the last Anime Revo, they had army recruitment people. They had people from the bank trying to get open up a student bank account or get a student credit card, or these extreme adventure people that do sign up for like bungee jumping or zip lining or something, right? You have people who are like, as I said, a lot of people who have particular services like printing services. Like I remember one of the ones was you can take an anime image and we can print it on a decal for your car, and you can cover your entire car in like a Genshin Impact picture or something or whatever. There was people who sell like soaps and perfumes and the kind of stuff, and wellness stuff, right? Just because they have a few containers or whatever that are done in an anime figure or whatever, they'll sell their entire rest of their line of like stuff that's not anime related in there. I was in Prince George and they got like 3 craft beer people in there just selling beer, cider, and all that other stuff. They had a booth kind of cordoned off, and you can get like free samples and all the whole stuff, right? Not related, but sure. Put them in there.
This is crazy to think about. I mean, I don't want to use the word desperate, but it kind of sounds like that, especially when you say there's like banks and army recruitment guys. I mean, I don't think they're selling like, say, hey, if you join the army, we'll turn you to into Saitama or Goku. I don't think that's what they're marketing, but like to think that essentially regular business folk who may not have any anime related thing at all in the slightest are actually at these events selling things. It's like that's just insane.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to get into that sort of, try to get into the local people that are kind of interested in anime, but maybe they might be interested in these other things, right? And that's where I get into those, those people who are interested in, let's say, bungee jumping or zip lining, or a whole bunch of these VR places are also in there, which I guess is kind of I guess they're going off the gaming angle, I guess. Escape room people, and obviously a lot of these sort of wine tour / craft beer tour places, that kind of thing. They're appealing to that kind of a market.
I mean, I haven't been to a convention in years, but like I don't even know what conventions would be like if you're telling me things like this. I'm kind of like concerned what are the British conventions like, because like say what you will about America and Canada, but like you guys usually get a lot better stuff than we tend to get over here, man. Yeah, I mean most of the like the guests that you'd want to get, they all come from somewhere in North America. To try and get them to come over here is almost like an impossibility sometimes. And the selection and the range of stuff we have as well is like it pales in comparison to you guys. So man, if you're getting army recruitment at banks, then I can only wonder, like, okay, so who am I going to pick up car insurance from, when I go there?
Yeah, it used to be a good mix of Japanese things. Usually, the big draw was a Japanese artist or a director or voice actor or something like that, right? Then another big thing that was a big thing for a con at that time was you'd get a Japanese band, an actual person that actually sells stuff in Japan and whatnot. I remember SakuraCon had Hero, Anime Expo had Move, people that are actually very, very predominant in Japan and actually makes it onto the Oricon charts, right? Now it's gone to a point where, those guys are too expensive now. So now we're just going to have a local band that, sings their stuff and covers Japanese songs, I guess. Can't get Japanese voice actors. So we'll just get English dub voice actors because they're, in Vancouver, a lot of stuff is done out of Ocean Studios and that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of those guys around. You get a lot of, I guess you can call them network or internet influencers or YouTubers / the last convention had VTubers, right?
What are your thoughts quickly on VTubers? I'm kind of curious as an old school fan.
The closest analogy I have to a VTuber is that it's that dating profile that you look on the internet, put up a picture of some girl or whatever, and when you actually go to talk to the person, it's actually a guy.
Oh, okay.
Or it's the girl that basically went and took a picture of a model or whatever, right? And then posted that as her prime picture. But when you actually meet her in person, it's like, you're not that person in the picture.
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's
it's I mean, great. I mean, if they can market themselves in that way, sure. There's an audience, there's a following for that, I guess. But here we are getting into a point where, are we actually running out of anime content, as in like stories from mangas and anime to watch, that we actually have to generate our own? Meaning we have to make our own virtual idols. Hatsune Miku isn't enough. We have to make our own B idols and well, that is there not enough Japanese music out there that we have to made singing groups that sing Japanese songs instead of getting the original artists to sing them? We'll just get some girls that dress up in maid outfits and let them sing it, and that's a thing, right?
Essentially what I'm hearing is, for an old school fan, what mattered was the authenticity. It was the fact that it was Japanese more than anything else. It had to be officially something that came from the land of the rising sun. What you're feeling as a Japanese fan nowadays, or Japanese anime fan nowadays, who came from those old school days, is you feel there's a lack of connection back to that authenticity where all of this would have came from.
I think the key actually is more that this sort of focus is no longer about the anime, right? We used to watch a particular anime because it was it has great storytelling. The voice acting was good. I love the character design. I particularly like how female characters are drawn and how they're portrayed and character development and all this sort of stuff. But now it's all about me. Right? It's all about what I can do with the anime. If I can draw Naruto, if I can cosplay Naruto, if I can sing like a Japanese idol band, make my own girl group or boy group or whatever, right? It's all about now what I can do, and I'm just piggybacking off the anime as a vehicle. I'm going to use their character designs. I'm going to use their songs. I'm going to use their, let's say, figures and drawing style, like, for example, Hatsune Miku and that kind of stuff. And I'm just going to generate my own content. And that's what's getting marketed, right? Because when you feature a VTuber, okay, without that person behind it creating the content or whatever, what is it, right? It's just an English person or whatever hiding behind an anime figure, right? An idol group that comes from here. Basically, you got a bunch of your, girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever, get them together and let's sing a bunch of BTS songs and, let's copy the same moves that, Morning Musume does and sing a couple of their songs. And then all of a sudden we got an act, put that on TikTok and let's monetize it. Is that, the same anime that we had from before? Is that the same kind of Japanese cultural experience that we had before? No, of course not. It's a lot more of fan generated using the Japanese IP. And I see a lot more of that happening. And I guess that's, artistic expression, but that's,
So essentially, to understand this point, which is very new to me to think about in that sense, it's as you say, it's not about the anime anymore. It's about what the fan can generate. The quote unquote anime influencers, they weren't the people who, say, created the anime or the work that essentially they are making content about. Originally, we were in a culture where, as fans, we celebrated, we came together to enjoy and be fans of a work. Nowadays, it's not so much a focus on the official works, it's now a focus on the fan communities and what the individual creators within those fan communities actually create.
Yeah, that'd be a good way to say it. Because let's use Sailor Moon for example. Like, so, basically in the 90s and whatnot, 95, well, whatever, when it first came in, we all celebrated watching Sailor Moon on TV and that kind of stuff when it first came out. All these, I remember people would tell me that, they'd come home from school at 3:00 and they'd turn on their TV and right away you get your episode of, let's say, Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball or Gundam Wing, and we'd all be really super excited about that. They'd show their appreciation by going out and buying Sailor Moon posters, or maybe get that box set for Sailor Moon, maybe go and get a Japanese art book that contains all of Takanouchi's artwork and that kind of stuff. That would be the way that they would do a Sailor Moon. Nowadays, it's I'll just stream Sailor Moon. I'm interested in it, so I'm going to now build a Sailor Moon costume. We'll go to conventions and we'll hang out with other Sailor Moon people. Maybe they are an artist or whatever. Now they'll Photoshop their own posters of Sailor Moon, create their own sort of works. And of course, maybe they'll even get a group of friends together, and the five of them will do, a Sailor Moon skit or whatnot, or do, maybe even put something like a channel talking about magical girl shows or something and whatnot. Things related to Sailor Moon, but that's how they branched off, and that's how they're making use of the Sailor Moon IP, even though the IP has passed and has moved on to other things, right? But they continue to use it in their own way to forward themselves, right?
Is your issue then primarily then to do with the profiting off of an IP in a way which essentially does not support the IP ultimately in itself? So, for example, let's say Dragon Ball, right? If I was to go off and be an influencer and I go do videos about Dragon Ball on YouTube and get monetized and Patreon and all that, is your issue to do with the fact that if I was to do this, regardless of me showing essentially, doing stuff that is, say, fan related and fan work, that fan work is only benefiting me and instead of, say, the IP itself?
Well, yeah, in many ways, again, this is a sort of an evolving process, right? So, because as I said, in the early days, the model for making money and whatnot and licensing and that kind of stuff was based on physical merchandise. Now that we're switching over to a digital model, right, everything's converted over to licensing. So it used to be that, let's say, the manga artist for let's say Naruto, for example, right? Every time they sold mangas and that kind of stuff and whatnot, they obviously would get some royalties or some commissions and that kind of stuff from that particular sale of that of the manga. And of course, when the TV series gets that licensed and whatnot, there's obviously some revenue from that. But now, once that initial sort of licensing and that kind of stuff has passed, they obviously aren't selling the same amount of stuff as they used to before. obviously they're not selling the same number of DVDs and that kind of stuff as they did before. But still, you can see a lot of people still selling lots of Naruto's merchandise that they've created, either, Naruto costumes, Naruto posters, and that kind of stuff. So what in the end happens is that, is the artist that does Naruto sort of getting fairly compensated for what he does? Obviously, he'll see this is not the case. And maybe, this is the unfortunate part, is that maybe he'll just stop doing any new mangas and that kind of stuff for Naruto, just because he's fed up with the slight. Because as I said, manga artists and that kind of stuff, and even creators and that kind of stuff, aren't getting paid a lot in comparison to, if you think of the chain of production and whatnot in these places. So to see his works go as popular as they are, I think, things like Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece, I think Bleach, and probably Full Metal Alchemist and things like that have probably greatly become extremely popular, probably more popular than they initially planned to be. But are the artists that made these things, do you think that they got enough from all the hard work that he's done to say, this has been really popular. I think people would want me to write more, or write a different story, or continue doing more of this kind of stuff? I mean, he might look back and say, no, I spent all this time making this stuff for that, and I didn't see a single cent more for this stuff. So I'm not going to make any more, One Piece or whatever. And then people would be like, well, no, why not? It's so popular. So many people like it. You should make more. And then he's like, no, I'm not interested in making more. And then he walks away from the project. And I think if this happens to, let's say the higher tier people, what do you think it happens to the people that are just scraping by with less known projects, right? The ones that still haven't made it out of the weekly shonen magazines, right? Not being serialized, not being put into manga form. They're going to find it pretty hard. And after their sort of window passes, and they're kind of going, maybe manga isn't really my way, or maybe make story writing and that kind of stuff is not my way, and they go out and get a blue collar job, or I think that's what eventually will lead to just less interesting stories, more formalized stories, less people willing to challenge the artistic envelope and bring us that refreshing new take, new sort of concept that the anime, at least the modern anime, really, really needs. I really wonder, and I think that it's not a good cycle to get into.
Thinking about essentially where the money is going to, I've never really thought about it like this before. I think maybe that speaks to my own sort of lack of business know-how, or lack of thinking about where the money goes in that sort of sense. I
think a lot of people are in the same sort of thought. It's just that they're only concerned about how it affects them, how they can monetize it, how they can make it go viral, things like this. And that's fine. I mean, that's their hustle. That's their way of doing things, right? But in the end, we have a lot of probably anime fans that sort of got into their animes and watched their animes and that kind of stuff. A lot of the stuff that we now have, you can get for absolutely for free. There was a story that I was doing for Creamy Mami. It's another one of these magical girl shows. Artwork is also done by Akimi Takada. I never did do the translation for that one, even though it was one of the Akimi Takada works, just because I thought the era in terms of a magical girl show was just a little bit too early. The story development in terms of the love triangle and that kind of stuff was too obvious to be going through. So that's why I followed it very loosely, but I didn't want to take the extra time to translate it. But one thing nice about technology is that I can now go back to all these old shows and actually now watch them and actually now know what's actually going on. So yeah, so I went on this effort to actually locate and try to find the translation for Creamy Mami. So the first thing I do is you go and try to see if you can find like a DVD box set or whatever, and to see if it's available. And I find on eBay this guy selling box 1 and 2 of it, and it's like $35 a box. So it's not that expensive. Sure, I go for it. But then as I'm searching for it, I realized this is only half the series. What is there more boxes to it? And I find out that okay, there's supposed to be a box 3 and 4, but virtually nobody seems to have a box 3 and 4. And so I go, okay, all right, maybe it's just out of stock, or maybe it's just been discontinued or something, because that usually happened back in the day. It turns out that the licensing and that kind of stuff for Creamy Mami was a little different. They crowdsourced the licensing fee for Creamy Mami. Crowdsourced it. Apparently it cost $18,000 to release a box set for Creamy Mami. So they decided to crowdsource it. And then they got the money. They made the box set, and I guess all the people who paid in, got their box sets and that kind of stuff. And so they continued this process for box 2, box 3, and box 4. And the company made extra copies so that they could sell these to I guess to the the big box places and that kind of stuff. But what had happened is they realized that the extra inventory that they printed counts as inventory. So you get an inventory gain, and therefore they can get taxed on the extra inventory.
Oh my God.
So then they also made this announcement. If you're interested in this box set, you have to buy it by some June or something of this year or whatever. And if you don't, we're going to destroy all the discs from this point onwards so that we don't have to count it in inventory. So you can imagine this company made whatever the minimum number of discs they needed to make for the release, right? They probably made a couple thousand more so that they can sell to whatever Walmart or whatever. Then they realized, we're going to get taxed on this stuff. So then they destroyed all the copies. So that basically made all the people who bought 1 and 2 right away, and anyone who paid for the they got it all, right? But the people who kind of bought 1 and 2 and were kind of hesitant to buy the rest, well, now they lost their chance, and all the rest of the remaining copies have now been destroyed, and now 3 and 4 aren't available.
This takes tax evasion to a whole new level.
So what had happened then is going, well, what the hell am I supposed to do trying to find this? Anyway, so I kept searching and whatnot, and so I'll finally find out that Creamy Mami is available on some streaming services. And so eventually I managed to find one. It was Tubi, if I remember right. You can watch Creamy Mami with commercials. So I managed to get all the episodes of Creamy Mami. But then, see, now this is what I'm thinking. Like, how much does Akimi Takada get from people now watching Creamy Mami and whatnot? Obviously, she wouldn't be making enough to think of, well, I should maybe make a sequel for Creamy Mami or anything like that. No, she would never do that. But just a sort of an interesting concept, if it was, let's say, a newer person that's releasing anime, they realize, okay, I made this anime or whatever, it did its initial run, and now it's on all these streaming services for literally next to nothing. New people are watching all this anime for next to nothing. The original artist for this thing is obviously getting close to next to nothing, if anything. And so what's his inspiration for making a sequel for whatever the show happens to be?
The way I'm sort of seeing it then, from what you're saying, is what would the anime industry be like if there was no, say, fan-made merchandise sold in dealers' rooms and whatnot? You had to go through official licensing to be able to be granted the permission to use IPs to make your own, say, your own Sword Art Online cosplay and your Pokemon plushies and stuff like that. You have to seek permission. So essentially, what if we lived in a world where this stuff didn't happen, where every piece of merch you bought was official, either because it was produced by the official people or it was essentially licensed to third parties to make their own form of it, but essentially still getting some licensing fee from gaining permission to do that with the IP? What kind of industry would we have if merchandise was all legit and all the money made from that merchandise all went back to the original creators? Would we have a very different anime industry, one that had money to spend and actually make even, dare I say, better anime than what we have now, I guess? Would that be fair to say that's essentially what I'm hearing?
Yes. Reason why this is important, because, and you may notice how this affects how anime is released nowadays, is that once you come up with an idea, like so for example, I'm going to make an anime for, let's say, Sword Art Online, okay? If you knew that, okay, we're going to line up action figures. We're going to line up this set of posters. We're going to have a soundtrack, and we're going to make certain amount of this. They'll have charted revenue streams, and they'll know how much they can expect to make from all these different streams and how things will sell and whatnot. Based on that, they can license. It used to be that they can license content for a certain number of episodes or a certain number of seasons. That's why, so a lot of the older animes almost always guaranteed to be 13 episodes, 26 episodes, 36 episodes, 40/46, 50 episodes, because those are logical season break points where when you negotiate the license and when you get the production people going and that kind of stuff, they know, hey, we are good for 13 episodes. We're going to write the show for this many episodes. We know what it is. I love to use the Double Zeta Gundam because that's one of the ones that I remember doing the translation for. It follows the storyline metrics almost perfectly. Gundam, okay, we know we're going to make model kits. We're going to make so many soundtracks. We got posters and we got all this other stuff going. Because it's a Gundam, we're pretty much going to guarantee you 50-ish episodes, right? The writing crew and all these other people already know here's your allotted time. This is what your story is going to be. So, the first 13 episodes, basically, feeling in the story, introducing the characters, goofing around, because that's what Double Zeta was about. But you know that you're going to leave episode 12 at the cliffhanger. You're going to use episode 13 as a summary episode for the first 12 episodes, and then you spend the second half of the episode with new content to bring in the new season. 13 to 26 is basically character development. The enemy forces are going to get stronger. You're going to get your asses kicked. You end on a cliffhanger on 26. New summary episode of 27. Usually you have to bring in new merchandise. So let's bring in the new Gundam, the new transformation scenes, new set of marketing toys and that kind of stuff or whatever comes out at that time. And so they got it all planned out and all figured out based on a known money, cash flow, basically a formula on how this is going to all work, and a structure, how all this works. But if you remove all that and you put all this uncertainty, whether or not this thing is going to, even go, then you reduce a TV show such as like a Gundam like that down to essentially the same as a movie or an OVA. Okay, you know what? We're going to release this because we don't know how it's going to sell. We have no planned known sales figures for this type of anime. We don't know how many posters we can sell, if we can sell any at all. Are we going to have enough music to make a soundtrack? Well, maybe not. So, okay, we may not be able to depend on that. So we will only make the one. Okay, so they make Devil Hunter Yoko 1, throw a little bit of skin in there, and hey, it's all set and popular, posters are selling, and that, because, okay, great, so now we can use this money to make number 2. And so the problem with this process is that you may not be able to make long drawn, these nice story arcs, character development. You might not be able to fully, because that's usually one of the things that when you have something like a Gundam or whatnot, you can introduce every single character and you can have a story about every single character. So, for example, Gundam, they went over everyone's story, the Juro story, and how his parents got killed, and the evolution of Itu, Lulu, all the characters had their own episode. Even the freaking little annoying kids had their own episode. Puru had her own episode. She had more than one episode. Every little character had an episode, And they can do that when the series is planned out and made out. Whereas if you don't know, you're basically going to end up going, well, we're gonna release 4 episodes. If it sells, then maybe we'll make the next 4. Or we'll only give you 13 episodes. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, we're going to cut the show off and that's it. That's all anyone's going to get. And too bad. That's how now the modern anime is, because they don't know their cash flow. Okay. And, and I really, really hate those type of shows. And unfortunately, it happens in anime more often than not.
Speaking of modern anime, I'm kind of curious because obviously you've consumed vast quantities of old school retro anime. What do you think of today's anime story trends nowadays? Do you think it's good, or do you think it's okay, or do you think there's some things that are missing that you kind of wish were still here?
I see a lot of things that are more common. We're going to take an old idea, concept, or whatever, and we're going to just put a little bit of a spin on it, and then we're going to make a new story of that kind of thing, right? Either that, or we're going to take an old IP and we're just going to reboot it some way, add some more new stuff onto it, or even retell it, or let's re-CG it or something or whatever, and put it out that way. And what this sort of kind of tells me, we're not coming up with the new ideas, the new, striking thing as often as we did in the past. Now, I get it. I get it because everyone refers to the era of the tail end of the 80s to, basically all of the 90s, right? As sort of the golden era of anime, where literally everything was being explored, all the new sort of avenues and concepts were being put out there. And we were getting a lot of defining animes that later puts the mark for a lot of the future things that go onwards, right? That's the era that we get into these really long formulaic series. Ranma, Inuyasha. You get all the ones that deal with the digital isekais, if you will. Zero Expense Lane, Hack Sign, and then of course you went on to things like the Sword Art Online and that kind of stuff. And then you got the newer rendition of the Earth is getting attacked by these guys or whatever. We have a way to fight back them things. So, i.e., the Neon Genesis Evangelions. So you have these pivotal sort of pretty well defining animes. My question is where are we going next? What's the next one that we haven't tackled? And so far, a lot of stuff that are coming out and a lot of stuff that's being remade are just things that we've taken from the past, and we're gonna update it some way, we're gonna redo it or something like that. So that I don't know where that's gonna come. And of course, the issue is if the money's not in there, where is my inspiration as a writer to come up with this next new idea? If money is so tight, you're talking to a board or a committee that's going, no, that idea is too edgy. It's against the cookie cutter mold. I don't think this is going to make money, so we're not going to do it. So think how many ideas went that way. If anything, that's where my sort of grim outlook for it comes from.
Moving on to a different topic, I remember there being some kind of a boom in the 90s when it came to the anime industry. What happened in the 90s?
In the early 90s, a lot of U.S. companies and that kind of stuff were jumping onto the bandwagon, getting anime and that kind of stuff, and releasing a lot of their animes. And it ramped up really quickly through the 90s, right? 85 and that kind of stuff was 95 was when things like the Sailor Moons and the Gundam Wings and getting it on Toonami and that kind of stuff. So you can imagine the amount of licensing money that was coming in on literally dead IPs. Think about it, right? Something as old as Bubblegum Crisis that came out in 86, 87, all of a sudden get a breath of new life in like 94 in hundreds of thousands of dollars of licensing fees. Now these companies can take this stuff and make more animes with it and be a lot more looser and freer with their anime choices and stuff. Not saying that all the animes they made were very good, some of them, but it allowed a new influx of anime. So that because I know that a lot of people think very fondly of the early 2000s when the big push for a lot of anime came out. That's when all the really big titles were from Pioneer came out, right? At that time, they were literally untouchable. Almost everything that came out was a banging hit. Tenchi Muyo, Fushigi Yugi, Black Heaven, Angel Links, Outlaw Star, Trigun, hit after hit after hit, all really, really good. Bandai was also doing really good at that time. They were riding off the coattails of Gundam Wing, then of course the OEVA for that. Then they started releasing all the rest of the other Gundams, Gundam 080, 003, MSOA Team. Then they started releasing Gundam Seed. So they were on a hot streak full of nothing but great hits and that kind of stuff. So you just can imagine all this cash inflow of money to help make not only newer animes, but also to things that they thought, well, nobody would be interested in this because it's 10 years old. But no, these guys are coming up, picking up all that stuff and, releasing that. This is where I get into the case where, like, for example, Evasion was going, yeah, this is old anime called Aurora, the Battler Dunbine. Yeah, I know it came out in, like, 83, but sure, we'll give you a couple $100,000 to license all that and release it and find out that it didn't sell. But,
that's just a way.
Yeah, but still, they got the money for it, right? It was all good and dandy. Everyone was really jumping on the bandwagon to get that kind of stuff out. Because I remember I went down to San Diego Comic-Con in 2004, and literally a lot of the booths that even weren't thinking of anime were making stuff that was anime. So you go to Marvel Comics, right? Get a Japanese artist, or let's make a cover that looks like anime. It gets really bad when like Penthouse and Playboy and Hustler and all these guys are putting out anime, right? So it's
oh God, okay,
right? You can tell that the media has really got into it, right? So as I said, the money was going in good, cash flow was all coming in, and then the market started changing in the mid 2000s, right? Until we got basically to the crash of 2008. That's where everything ended, and a new model had to be made.
What was the anime crash of 2008? What actually happened, and what actually led up to that?
I mean, a lot of people will say it's because of the global housing crisis thing that happened in the market crash in 2008. But I argue that in anime already started happening even as early as 2004. Here we are at an age where anime was exploding. It was like a lot of people were getting into anime. All the commercial people were trying to see how they can get into the anime market and try to see how they can make money off of anime, right? So everything was getting licensed. Even these titles that never would have deserved the North American market, they got licensed with the pretense that, they're going to make money off it. Basically, we're getting to a point where if everyone's trying to get into this anime market, trying to make money off of anime, but there's only a limited number of anime fans and a limited amount of budget. It got to a point where if you were trying to keep up with anime and trying to find out and buy anime, you would have to spend about $1,000, $1,500 every month to keep up with the new DVDs that kept coming out in like the early 2000s. I have receipts, even with my, even with the 25% discount, still added up to over $1,000 to buy all the new, Dragon Balls, Trigun and Cowboy Bebop and all this other stuff. And obviously, yes, for an everyday average person, this would be absolutely impossible to maintain. But yet they were still pumping out this rate, anticipating an increasing number of people getting into anime, an increasing number of people buying anime and that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is that people are starting to pick and choose. People are starting to say, no, I'm only going to buy, my Sailor Moons and that's it. Or I'm only going to buy, anything having to do with Dragon Ball and that's it. I'm not going to go anywhere else. Or, they're starting to become a lot more pickier. Also, the fact that a lot more sources are being available to get more anime. So more places that had, video rentals. I think at this time, even our public library started carrying anime, both manga and DVDs and that kind of stuff. So you could just go to the public library and just sign it up for free. So so not as many people are buying as many as animes as they used to, right? But yet they still continue to produce, say, for example, I remember hearing an interview. At the initial start, they used to produce 10,000 DVDs for Tenchi Muyo. Later on, one of the voice actresses said that was in the heyday and that kind of stuff. And sometimes when they ran out of that print run, they'd have to print the next 10,000. But then later on, past the 2004, 2006, that number dwindled all the way down to like 2,000. So on a new DVD or whatever, they'd only build and make in, let's say, 2,000, maybe 5,000 DVDs at a time, because that's all they could sell. And so it got to a point of total market saturation and everything by about 2008. And then with the market crunch and everything that happened in 2008, money got really tight. All the anime licensing people at that particular time basically became a shell of themselves. They couldn't continue releasing their animes and that kind of stuff the same way that they used to. That's where the model had to change. I don't think we've ever really recovered in the same way ever since.
What role did digital fansubs play in all of this then? Because my sort of understanding was that the digital fansubs were more of the problem than, say, too much market saturation and too much investment spent in producing essentially DVDs that no one was buying.
Digital fansubbing, the initial start of it was probably in the early 2000s. The whole event of digital fansubbing, with the increase of the internet speed, was the sort of the perfect storm that came together. Because in the past, it was always been technological challenges that basically facilitated the use of VHS trading and this entire model where we had to pay for and get physical merchandise, right? But in the 2000s, it was just the right sort of moment in time where the computers are fast enough to do the editing on a personal computer. The internet just got fast enough so that the transfer time between two locations was reasonable. It wasn't like a dial-up speed or non-cable type of internet speeds. And the compression methods that we had reduced the size of the files to something that was reasonable, yet still enough to keep the quality. In the early days, we had things like Rio Player and DivX, and we all know that those were like pretty horrible back in the day. So,
goodness me, do I feel old hearing those things?
Yeah. So obviously, yeah. So now that we've got ourselves, technologically advanced enough that we've got better compression methods and fast enough computers to do this stuff, it was a natural use of the technology and the equipment to begin fansubbing this stuff and doing it quickly. Because now the transfer time is no longer limited by, we have to wait for the lasers to come out. We have to wait till someone to send the videotape from Japan over to North America. No. Now we can actually have someone in Japan record it digitally or whatever on a PVR or whatever, take that file, send it over online or whatever. That file can be then copied, it can be distributed. Multiple people can work on the same file at the same time at different points. Multiple people can be divvied up to do different tasks. So one can do the typesetting, one can do the proofreading, translations, timing checking, graphics, whatever it happens to be. And so the time it takes to take something that aired in Japan to actually doing all the production work and getting it all ready got down to literally the same day. And this, of course, obviously is a problem because, for the people who are releasing One Piece and Naruto and that kind of stuff, this is going to cut into their money and marketing share and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, especially stuff that's getting televised, most of the money was made in licensing and that kind of stuff rather than actual buying physical DVDs. So, I mean, obviously, sure, you're not going to sell 10,000 DVDs, but you made a lot of money selling the network rights to Tsunami or something like that, right? So so that's where a lot of the money paid for the licensing and that stuff came in from. So it came from there, right? The closer that you got to that, 2008, and closer you got to the oversaturation point where there's just so much other stuff that's out there. How much time do you want to have these people keep up with all this stuff all at the same time? So then that's where people got into the issue. And it wasn't just digital fansubbing and that kind of stuff. There's all the people also doing all the scanlations and all that kind of stuff for all the mangas and that kind of stuff. People are literally taking apart a manga for a Naruto, feeding it through a sheet feeder scanner, and all of a sudden all the pages are all available online. You can download it as one big block, right? The people that would normally sell the manga at Chapters or whatever, or Barnes and Noble and whatnot, would be obviously losing money in that respect too. So there's a lot of encroachment on a lot of revenue streams and that kind of stuff, and basically just got to this point of total chaos, as it were, lawlessness, if it will. But I said it didn't drag on very long before everything just sort of changed, and the model now changed. And I think as we progress in the future, they'll get to a point where we're not going to need anything like digital fansubbing and that kind of stuff, because it'll be all auto translated. We'll have just something very close to a universal translator very, very soon.
I want to pivot off to something else here. I've been thinking about something I saw in your episode index. So for those who are discovering you for the first time, Wiliam has a really thoroughly indexed episode index for all the videos he's done, which tells you basically what every video is about and links to them and stuff. It's a Google spreadsheet doc that he's got in all the descriptions of every one of his videos. There's one particular description in one of these episodes that caught my attention. How did anime and anime fans as a whole get a bad rep?
It stems from the early days of anime. Back in the day, when all these movies and popular media and that kind of stuff comes out, anything that wasn't, shall we say, popular mainstream genres, okay? So if you weren't into Flashdance and Top Gun and Rocky and all this other stuff. But no, if you were only interested in, let's say, Star Wars, you're going to dress up as a stormtrooper? Oh, how nerdy is that? Or Star Trek. They had names for you. They called you Trekkies. And for anime, they had a term called otakus. And being called these things aren't nice things. These aren't not terms of endearment, right? They're the equivalent of, dork, weirdo, dreg of society, and that kind of stuff, right? And
even Trekkie.
Yeah,
even Trekkie was a derogative term.
Exactly, because okay, sure, you're a fan of Star Trek, and maybe you like to cosplay in those tights and all that kind of stuff. But at that time, spandex was not a nice thing, and people will say, "Oh, look at that weirdo, and he's a Trekkie." Well, look at that guy dressed up in a stormtrooper uniform. If you remember that music video, "Loser," the guy who is in the video is dressed up in a stormtrooper outfit. And, the song goes, you're a loser, baby, so why don't you shoot me now, right?
Very, very nice subject matter, okay.
So people attribute, Star Wars fans and Star Trek fans and now anime fans as losers. And in Japan, part of the reason was that otaku is thought as this person who's overly obsessive about, let's say, video games or arcade games, manga collecting, anime, whatever it happens to be, right? They're just overly obsessive. Usually referring to people that are, a little overweight because they sit inside all day. They're kind of socially inept because they don't interact with people. Maybe they have big, huge collections of hentai and, deluging in socially unacceptable stuff. So, that's how the moniker of being dregs of society, not married, living at home with the parents, that kind of thing, all gets grouped in with that labeling, right? So when they bring that term over, you're an anime fan, you must be one of these type of people. What really didn't help is until 1995, the primary marketing of all the US people that are licensing anime followed the 3 Gs: girls, guns, and gore. If your video has any of these 3 things or all 3, that is the method of success. So you think of all the videos that came out in the early 90s. Ixir 1, Dangayo, Project Eiko, Devil Hunter Yoko, Dirty Pair. Think about it, right? Girls, they pull out the guns, they start shooting things, killing things. Probably a big turnoff for other female audience members, right? It wasn't until they realized, hey, there's this whole other half of the market that we can probably be selling anime to if we just stop making and releasing things like Wicked City and all this other stuff, and actually start releasing things that they might like. So in comes Sailor Moon, things like Inuyasha, and all this other kind of stuff that starts tailoring towards them, and so that brings them into the market, and then that sort of lightened what the term otaku sort of meant. And when the genre of anime became sort of more universally accepted, more places started carrying anime, then that sort of dissolved this sort of, anime is only for the weirdos and the freaks and that kind of stuff. And the word that usually comes up is dorks. Now it can be used more affectionately here. That's why you get things like Otaku Con as the name of convention, or Anime Expo will go and say the Otaku Experience, or the largest fan otaku convention in North America, for example. So now they're just now throwing this word around where it used to be a lot worse, right? Because now, for example, in modern day, you don't see come to the next Trekkie convention or something like that anymore. Right? They don't refer to that.
I guess in some ways you could almost say it could be down to the personality and the profile and the sort of people you would have been to have been into this stuff. I mean, as you say, anime back in the old days, to access it, you had to be fairly tech savvy. And obviously people nowadays are tech savvy, but it was a very different thing back then. People weren't typically tech savvy in that sense. What do you think really changed then over time? That really made anime and all this other stuff, dare I say, socially acceptable then, I guess, compared to what it used to be?
I think what it basically got down to is it used to be all the tech savvy internet, pre-Windows internet tech savvy people, right? It used to be just for those type of people. So basically you actually had to know your way around the computer using the internet without a Windows interface, for example. It used to be for those people who were comic book fans or science fiction fans or that kind of stuff, right? And basically we brought it to into the public, into the public eye, and the public eye saw it as the same way that we saw it, right? Wow, there's different stuff that is really well written, well animated, and probably the most important is that it's topics that aren't covered in animation as we know it. And at this time, you got to think, the things that are quote animated that most people are familiar with is obviously Saturday morning cartoons, your superheroes, Supermans and Batmans and all that stuff, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. You have all your regular made-for-kids stuff, your Scooby-Doos and your He-Man, She-Ra's and all that other stuff. You have the stuff that comes up from Disney, marketed mostly for kids, right? But then all of a sudden now you've got this, anime coming out, which has more adult-themed stories, actual things that portray real life and real life situations, even though they may have science fiction or different sort of world type of settings and whatnot and time settings, they still portray conflict and resolution, struggles and all that kind of stuff, which a lot of these other shows just don't. And that's something that people realize, hey, this is actually really good. This is a legitimate type of genre. As that became more accessible to the public, it also became more well known to the public. And I think that's, that brought in all the rest of the people that aren't the tech savvy people, that brought in all the female audience that was, been excluded for the longest time. That's how that would have occurred.
What anime works do you think really caused that to happen, which really expanded that popularity to the mainstream? For me, in I guess my generation of things, that would have been Attack on Titan. That literally sent waves around the planet. It's insane, like how much impact that show had and how much that brought into the anime community and the anime fandom itself from the outside. But what older works would you say did that as well, from say your experience and what you've seen?
I think at the very, very beginning, so even before all the commercial animes and that kind of stuff were coming out, I think the first key sort of anime that happened was definitely Orange Road. Because you got to think at this time in the late 80s, the anime that most people would have been familiar with would have been things like Robotech, Macross and that kind of stuff. So, oh no, the Earth is getting attacked. We're gonna, how we're gonna, beat them off and save the Earth type of thing. That was
space operas, basically.
Yeah, so basically, that would define your Robotech / Macross. That would define Space Cruiser Yamato, and in a little bit, that would also define some of the Captain Harlock and Queen of a Thousand Years. Essentially, those are the early animes that we would have had at that time that would have fell into that mold, right? And then all of a sudden, we got introduced to essentially a slice of life type of anime. And I think a lot of people are kind of taken back, saying, "Wow, yeah, I mean, sure, why can't you have a slice of life anime?" And they find out that this is actually really nice. This is watchable. This is relatable. I think that's another thing that I liked about Orange Road is it was really, really relatable in the sense that again, I just came out of high school and started university, and then all of a sudden these things that sort of happened, in the Orange Road story, I can kind of go, yeah, I can relate to that happening to me at one time, right? Well, yeah, without all the psychic powers,
if only.
If that happened, I think my high school would be much different, But but yeah, I can relate to different things in that. Whereas in a larger space opera type of thing, it may be hard for you to see and place yourself in those kind of things, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of these later animes that we got into, even some of the things in a Magical Girl show, they can relate to an episode or two or can see the point in one of these animes. And that's maybe something that they've never seen or been able to do in a show that has been put out at that particular time. So that's why I picked something like Orange Road or Maison Ikkoku, which is one of the first slice of life type of shows that we did early on. I think the next major one that sort of would have came into the timeline would be either Revolutionary Girl Utena or Sailor Moon, because they sort of came out at the same time and they both had some similar type of themes, okay? And that is the sort of first time that you get into these shows which are really, that go against the girls, guns, and gore mantra. The female character is the strongest character, as opposed to the male character. It's written with Sailor Moon trying to find the boyfriend, trying to find Tuxedo Mask. It's just a different angle that has now been presented, and now it brings in the other half of the audience. So, and big shows like Neon Genesis Evangelion, that would be a really pivotal thing. Just a totally different angle on the, oh no, we're getting invaded by whatever type of thing, right? I guess one of the newer concepts that came out with that one is just the varied endings and interpretations of how the endings work, how to just mess with your mind, that kind of idea. Cowboy Bebop, obviously, just awesome soundtrack to that. Just really well done on that respect. I think the other major big entries in that respect would probably be things like Serial Experiments Lane and Pack Sign, because the whole getting into the internet, experiencing this other world within the internet, and that sort of opened up the sort of all going into another reality and that kind of stuff. Ghost in the Shell, for example, is another one that probably could be slotted into that same sort of category. It's not going to be the first isekais, but I mean, things like Fushigi Yugi, Escaflowne obviously came in at that time. I think those had a lot of influences to storylines going in those directions. But I think those ones would be probably some of the really big names that helped push off their own little subgenres as anime progressed. Yes.
You are just a treasure trove of knowledge and stories. Anyone who gets a chance to talk to you is going to have a good time, I'll tell you that much. For those who are curious to learn more about all the interesting things that you know and to find out more about you and just hear more of these stories from the past and just things that you've seen and witnessed, William, where can people find you?
So I have a YouTube channel, which I've created episodes covering a wide variety of different things in anime. So you can catch me there at YouTube/Wiliam Chow. I have my own archival website that I built. I haven't done too much updates to it, but I mean, it definitely has a nice snapshot of some of the stuff from the very past about me. You can catch that at anikionline.com.
I like the reference there. Is that another test like Anime Jyanai?
Not so much. It was one of the games that we used to play a lot in the store was Langreaser. Came out in English on the Sega Saturn or Sega Genesis as War Song. One of the hidden characters is these muscle guys called Anikis.
You got inspired.
Yeah. And so I said, oh yeah, okay, that's it. Build a website for the brothers online there.
For the brothers together. Well, William, it's been an absolute pleasure. Any final words for people listening to this?
Anime has gone a long way from the humble beginnings that we had. All I can say is that there's so much anime out there that to consume it would be really extremely difficult because it's just, we've got like 40 years of anime out there. But definitely, if you find yourself finding, modern anime seems boring or whatnot, I invite you to basically go back and check some of the different animes from the past, and you might find that there is a wealth of great storytelling, great artwork, and things to make you think and help you, maybe you view things in a little different way. Definitely, there's a lot more to come. So I think it'll be just easier and easier to consume this stuff in the future.
Aside from Orange Road, any other recommendations you'd give?
Oh, I got tons. I just finished on my site the top 30 animes for the 1980s. So I basically went through title by title, year by year, season by season, and picked out the absolute essential and best animes from every single period. And basically crunched it down to the top 30 OEVAs, the top 30 TV shows, and the top 30 movies that you should watch. If you get those 30, you pretty well encapsulated what the 80s were about. So again, I invite you to go and have a look at those and check out those titles.
William, you're an absolute godsend from every anime fan around the world. Thank you for the things you've done, and thank you for your service back in the old days.
Thank you. That was fun.